Hi, welcome to Ear for Fear. I'm Rick, and this is the podcast that talks about scary movies or movies trying to be scary. Today, we are joined once again by Jake Poindexter.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello.
Hey, man, thanks for coming back out. You were here last time, and we did Hellraiser.
Great movie.
Yeah. Before we jump into this, I want to do a quick synopsis, but really fast. Spoilers, and don't forget to check out Lesser Sons. Instagram, Lesser Sons Band.
Yes, sir.
Facebook, Lesser Sons. They're available on Spotify, Apple Music. If you're not listening to them, you should be listening to them. And if you're not following them, you should be following them. So
Thank you.
yeah. So let's do a quick synopsis of The Exorcist III, which is what we're doing today. 1990. A police lieutenant uncovers more than he bargained for as his investigation into a series of murders which have all the hallmarks of a deceased serial killer, leads him to question patients at a psychiatric ward. All right, man. Exorcist III. You recommended this?
This is a great movie.
This is a great movie. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I remember when this came out, I was working at the movie theaters at the time. The old Cinedomes. You remember the old Cinedomes?
The old Cinedomes, yes.
I don't know. There's still a theater there, but the domes are gone, long gone. I miss those. But I was there working at the theater when this came out. So a lot of times I would just kind of in between breaks or at a break or in between whenever, I'd hop in there and go check out scenes. And of course, I've seen this several times, and this is a phenomenal movie. And I think it's a good movie in general, but I think what makes it is George C. Scott and Brad Dourif. Like they carry this movie. I think it would still be a good movie, but I don't think it'd be a great movie if they weren't in it, man.
I think George C. Scott and Brad Dourif do carry this, but it's not just those two. It's
True.
Forget the actor who plays Father Dyer, but the rapport between George C. Scott and Father Dyer is just phenomenal.
It's really good.
I really think it calls back to, this is a movie that was directed by the guy who also wrote the book. And this is very much a writer's movie. Like the dialogue is just unreal. It's witty. It's funny. It's amazing. Great dialogue. It
is. And it's interesting with this movie. There are characters from this movie that are from the original movie. From The Exorcist, the original Exorcist with Linda Blair, Max von Sydow. Exorcist II, I saw one time. It was a hunk of crap.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you anything about it.
I will tell you this about it. Like, yeah. I don't think I've watched the entire Exorcist II, but I do still have like little creepy moments of the little kid, they're running out into the field and they find the kid and he looks up and says, "I am Pazuzu." Like that part is still burned into my memory and still freaks me out every once in a while. That and that alone.
Yeah.
The rest of that movie was garbage. That part was spooky.
I'll be honest, man. I watched it. I want to say I watched it late 80s, early 90s. I remember where I watched it and I'm thinking, oh, I hadn't seen this. Why didn't I see this? Okay, let me check it out. And that was one and only time. I don't remember anything other than it was bad.
Yeah, it was.
It was bad. So anyways, this one is not bad. This one is good. What we have here is let's run down the characters. Kinderman is played by George C. Scott. What is his? Is he a lieutenant? What is he? What is his?
He is a lieutenant.
He's a lieutenant. Okay. And we have Father Dyer. We have the Gemini Killer played by Brad Dourif. We have Dr. Temple, Nurse Allerton, Father Karras, of course, everyone would know Father Karras from
There's
the
your
first
spoiler.
Exorcist. There's your spoiler. Father Karras Stedman, which I believe is like I don't know what he is. He's like a cop or something. He's an investigator. I don't know what he is. He's not as high up as George C. Scott's character, but he's and then his partner Ryan. We got Nurse Keating, which, that's kind of important because she comes into play later. And Julie, which is the daughter. There's a few other characters. I mean, his wife, the mother-in-law. There's other people in this, but I think these are kind of the main characters.
Yeah,
right?
I think I tend to lose interest in the, characters in the periph unless those performances, particularly stand out for me. So we're getting into the deep cuts of
I don't want to do that. I don't want to go into victim number 1, 2, and 3 and the the bartender and this. I don't that stuff just doesn't. Yeah, man. I'm good with the main people. And this is this kind of takes. So let's try to break this down so we can kind of give a foundation. Basically, this is 15 years after Father Karras supposedly died.
Yes,
15 years. He is, everyone who hasn't seen Exorcist, hopefully you have, but if you've seen it, at the end of the original Exorcist, he gets possessed by Pazuzu, essentially to save Regan's character, and he throws himself out the window.
Yes.
And in the process of that, he supposedly breaks his neck or whatever else. He's dying.
Yes.
And so we assume he died. Well,
and I believe that the priest who's coming along at the end of that, when he lands and is holding his hand and giving him his last rites, was Father Joseph Dyer, who is played by another character in this movie.
Yes, I believe you're right.
So there's a lot of character overlaps. That could be guessing that. I could be wrong, but
I think yes, I'm not positive. We should have probably looked that up, but I think we could look it up. I think it's on the computer screen if you want to take a look. But I think you're right on that. Definitely a completely different actor altogether. And we think that Father Karras is dead. But that's not really what happened here. We have a Gemini killer played by Brad Dourif, who's phenomenal in this. He's a serial killer. He killed several people. Yep. He was caught. He was executed.
Yes.
So they think he's dead, right?
And what I can't remember is, for the sake of being accurate, I don't know if in the movie he's been executed, but I know that he was caught by the police in the book and he died in a hail of gunfire.
Oh, okay. Okay. So in the book Legion, written by William Peter Blatty.
Yes.
Who also wrote The Exorcist.
The Exorcist.
Yeah. And he wrote this and he directed this. Kind of similar to when you came over for the Hellraiser episode.
Yeah. So these are both of them are movies that were directed by the man who also wrote the book. So.
Correct. And so I don't know. I thought he was executed, but maybe he wasn't. I just watched it this morning. You'd think I would remember this.
I don't know if it's ever said in the film, and I know there's a couple of different versions of this movie, so maybe it was said in one of them. But it's beside the point. The point is he's dead. The man is dead.
He's dead, and we think Father Karras is dead. But what we have here is, let's call it Pazuzu. Pazuzu the demon is basically taking the spirit, the soul, out of the Gemini killer and inserting it into the body of Father Karras.
Yes, from what I understand, yes, that Pazuzu is a character in the periphery of what's going on. The Gemini killer has died, and Pazuzu is now facilitating the Gemini killer into another vessel, another body of a dead or dying person.
Correct.
In order to get revenge on the people who are still alive that facilitated his removal from said character
from Regan. Yeah, from Regan. And so it's interesting, man. Because I've seen this several times, but sometimes I don't know if you do this. Sometimes you watch a movie, and when you're sitting down to do an episode, I look at it differently than when I'm just sitting down regularly and just watching it for pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
So sometimes I don't catch stuff.
Yeah.
I'd watch this at least a handful of times over the years, and there were certain things I didn't catch.
Yeah, I think when you're in a certain mindset, you're kind of wanting to be able to suspend disbelief, and you're not analyzing everything and critiquing everything that you're watching. You're just kind of along for the ride and letting things happen.
So some of the dialogue that I didn't catch before, through Brad, Dorff's character, the Gemini Killer, and then I catch now, I'm like, oh my God, all this stuff makes sense. Some of it made sense before, but some of it didn't.
Yeah, when he's saying things like certain parties were things like that, and you realize that he's talking about Pazuzu.
Pazuzu, yeah. And so Pazuzu is pissed off. Pazuzu the demon is pissed off. Look, you exorcised me from this child back in. To me, I think The Exorcist came out in 1973, but what's funny is I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but at the very end, the tombstone said 1975, and I don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't know.
And so I don't know if that's even relevant, but I'm like,
there's definitely plot holes in this. I mean, I have a plot hole that's always bothered me about this film too, is that if you go back to the original Exorcist, and there's Lieutenant Kinderman, is played by a different actor. Was it Lee Cobb? I want to say.
What is that? Is he supposed to be the same character?
He's the same cop that was investigating the death of Burke Dennings, and he approaches Father Karras in The Exorcist for the first time and introduces himself. And so they go throughout that movie, and he's there when Father Karras comes out of the window. But in The Exorcist Part 3. He's constantly talking about how he was his best friend and how they had this really long relationship where they always went to the movies together and things like that. And George C. Scott has this line where he says he was my best friend. I loved him. Yeah. But we actually saw the entirety of their relationship in the original Exorcist film.
And that's supposed to be the same character.
It's the same character, yes.
Okay, then I thought that was the case. That makes no sense.
It's one of those things. Okay, that's weird. Let it go.
Yeah.
You need to let it go to enjoy this film, and this film still works for me.
Oh no, it does.
I mean, you remove the one line where he says he was my best friend, I loved him, and you still have a very intense scenario where two people that were involved in something crazy like an exorcism, developed a relationship, and even if it didn't go any further than that, how many movies do you have where characters are together for 24 hours and they forge like a great relationship?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, exactly.
So it's possible.
It is possible. So the beginning of this movie, we've kind of laid down, I think, the foundation of what we're going to see. We have a Kinderman he's basically called to a scene where it's basically a death of a child here.
Yes.
And this child he knew. Yeah. And he was decapitated, and I believe was it the head of a statue was put in its place?
Yes, without going into too many of the,
I don't want to
there's a lot of racial undertones to this particular killing. That's probably not necessary to go into, but it's heinous, it's disgusting in every version, every way you can think of being disgusting. This is a horrendous, heinous crime.
Yeah. And so he investigates this. Well, he notices some things about this death, other than it, obviously, the it being as bad as it is. He notices a few things. And so I'm trying to remember the second death. Was that the priest inside the church that was taking confession? Correct.
Yeah, which I believe that was Father Canavan was his name.
Okay.
And the second killing is the priest in the confession chamber.
Yeah, and we're starting again. He's starting to see a constant. Certain things that he remembers from, let's say, the Gemini Killer. He's starting to see these, which is it's disturbing to him because he knows the Gemini Killer is dead.
Yes,
and he's starting to see the similarities with these killings. Now, from an audience perspective, you and I watching this, we're seeing him pulling, let's say a sheet over and looking at a hand, and we see a left hand and we see a right hand, and we're seeing these things,
but we don't. And that's one of the,
we're not seeing it. We're seeing him doing that. And he's viewing this, and we don't get to see any of this, which is fine, but we're going to understand the relevance down the road.
Yeah.
And so, so then we get a little bit of character development and with him and Father Dyer. You can tell there is a strong relationship there. They were both friends of Father Karras, and to me, I never got the impression that George C. Scott's character Kinderman was. Look, who knows how long he's been doing this and how many things that he's seen, how many different killings, and just of everybody, including children. And then over time, you become maybe numb to it. And then this idea of whether there's a God or there's not a God.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was there, and maybe in the book it's more there, but I never got that impression that he was just not a true believer of God. Like, yeah, he's pessimistic and negative about these things, about, okay, well, if all these nasty, horrible things happen, well, how is there a God because of these things? Yeah. I never felt like it was like this huge message, but it's there.
Yeah, he's very much a grizzled detective, and he's played by somebody who's probably in his 60s at the time that he played it. And that's another thing that I have a hard time when I was rewatching this film, is that if they made this movie now, there would be comment after comment of, when are you going to retire, Kinderman? Because he is just so much older than the people they would put in movies today.
Yeah.
But I do like the difference between the way the actor played him in the first movie. He's almost kind of flattering to Father Karras when he approaches him on the racetrack.
Yes.
He's like, "You look like a boxer, John Garfield." Yeah. And then George C. Scott, he's taking this character on, and it's 15 years later, and he doesn't have that flattery to him. He doesn't have that, kind of charming way. He's just jaded. He's grizzled. He's old. He's tired. He's beat down. He's seen things that none of us, want to see. But his crisis of faith, I think, his conflict of faith comes through in his conversations with Father Dyer. You have a conversation with a priest. But I just like going back to the writing, I just like the idea that they introduce Father Dyer and they introduce Lieutenant Kinderman, and each of them think that they are going to the movies because they're meeting up at the movies.
Yeah.
And I have to go meet him. It's the anniversary of Damien Karras' death. He needs to be cheered up. And just that cool little thing where they both think that they're doing it to cheer the other one up. I loved it.
Dude. I did too. It's funny. I when I watched it this morning, I caught that, like, it was more prevalent than I had noticed it before. And it's like, I'm doing this for him, but it's man, you guys are both doing it for each other. Cause you both need it, man. But because of his kind of, like you were saying, him being a lieutenant and seeing all these things in this rough exterior, it's like, deep down, no, I want that time with my friend.
Yes.
And, and going to just to spend some time, seeing It's a Wonderful Life, and of course it's the anniversary of their friend, he won't admit it, but man, we all need that stuff.
It's the
right?
way that men, at least in movies, but I would imagine the way that men used to communicate when we didn't talk about our feelings with each other.
Yeah.
So they talk about all these other things, and you have to kind of read the subtext of what they're saying to what's going on with them. And so they're talking about religion, and Father Dyer actually notices that, there's something bothering him, and he knows that it's the kid that he's reading about it in the papers. And that's when the conversation takes on its kind of horrific tone where he describes the killing.
Yeah.
And just to go into that, like the way that the actor, and I forget the actor's name that played Father Dyer, but he was freaking brilliant. He was
something Sanders,
Gordy,
maybe
something.
I don't know. Let me look it up, man. Technology is phenomenal. So we're gonna
just the way that he reacts.
Ed Flanders.
Yep. great performance. Like his character, I loved his character, and I feel like I just believed him when he said the things. And so he went from being, there was some great dialogue about, when does it all right? Here's God, all these terrible things are happening, and your God is dancing around like some kind of cosmic Billy Burke. And he said, "Don't worry, it all works out."
Yeah,
it all works out. He's like, "When? At the end of time? That soon?" Just those quick one-liners. The quips are just, timing was great. It was fantastic.
And that's and that's what you see as the result of great acting, man. I mean, it's you can have a great movie. You can have a great movie, a great idea. And the execution sometimes just isn't there. And sometimes just acting alone can carry a movie because, look, there's a lot of horrific things happening in this movie. And it's classified as a horror movie, but there's a lot of dramatic stuff that's happening that you don't see in a lot of horror movies, but this works.
And I think go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
It was one of the main things about this film that I love was that it's not a horror movie. It's more like a police procedural. It's a psychological thriller that has a supernatural element to it.
Yeah.
There are plenty of other movies. I think like Batman comes to mind, the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, where every movie in the trilogy was actually a different genre. Another example of this would be like Alien to Aliens.
Yeah,
they switch genres.
Big jump, yeah.
And both of the movies are great. Like that's the great thing about this is I wouldn't consider this a horror movie. I would consider this a psychological thriller with a horror element, in there.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost argue Terminator to Terminator 2. Terminator, the first Terminator, it almost feels like a slasher, man. If you really,
I would have considered that a horror movie back in the 80s.
Yeah, but people were like, no, it's an action, and okay, I get that. I get that the action, part of it. But then when you jump to all of a sudden a Terminator 2, very different. I mean, both great in their, I mean, I love both of them. But they have a seriously different feel.
Oh yeah. And I honestly would look back at the first Terminator is every bit a horror movie.
Yeah.
The Terminator was a monster. You see the monster, you see the blood, like it was horrific. And then you see this monstrous skeleton coming after Linda Hamilton in the end after that. And then Terminator 2. Yeah. I think it's a rare thing that it's a way to keep a franchise, which if you would call this a franchise, it's a way to continue the story and keep it fresh, change the genre. Like the original Batman Begins is more of like, I would almost consider that like kind of a little bit of a horror movie. That was the idea of it.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Dark Knight and it's full on, like Michael Mann, what's the Heat, something like a police procedural. And then you go on to the third one and it's like the disaster, big budget, Avengers type movie. But
yeah, no,
we're getting off track here, but
that's okay. We can get off track all we want, man. It's our podcast. Do whatever we want. So we have the two deaths. We have this with Father Dyer and Kinderman and of course Kinderman is, after the two deaths, he's, again, like I said earlier, he's starting to see the similarity to something. We haven't found out what yet.
Yes.
But we know this is eating at him and it's bothering him. And he's quite disturbed and I would say frightened because, as we see down the road, he should be with this. And then we get Father Dyer. Again, we're jumping around a bit. We're not gonna hit every scene. If I forget something, please jump in and let me know. But Father Dyer ends up in the hospital.
Yes.
And I don't know really what it is. I mean, who knows what it is at the time? Is it just something's going on? He hasn't maybe.
And he has a cough.
He has a cough. Yeah.
And that's another example of the fantastic dialogue between those two characters, between George C. Scott and Ed Flanders. He goes into this whole diatribe. He's like, "I thought you said nothing was wrong," because he starts coughing. He says, "My brother Eddie had these symptoms for years." He's like, "Your brother Eddie died at 30 years old." Anyway, but yes, he's in the hospital, getting checked out. They're running tests or whatever.
Yeah.
He's not telling them what it really is. He's not telling them what they think it might be or what they're afraid it might be.
Yeah.
Because men just didn't discuss that stuff with each other.
No. What I thought was funny though is he brought him a penguin. And I was like, okay, I could see you brought him a burger. Dude, I could totally see that. Like, yeah, if I was in a hospital, my buddy would bring me a burger. But a penguin was weird to me. It wasn't
just a gag gift.
It was, I think that's what it boils down to, because that's not Kinderman's character, right? I'm not going to go and get you a penguin, a stuffed animal penguin, because it's more of kind of
could be like the type of thing that he found it on his way in somewhere.
For all we know, it's a inside joke with them or something, But I love Father Dyer's reading this. I don't know what paper was this. It was like
Women's Wear Daily.
Dude, that's awesome, man.
And just the dialogue between the two of them when he's commenting on shouldn't you be reading the Gospels or something? He's like, they don't give you all the fashions. Just the comedic timing, the dialogue between these two characters is just hilarious. Yeah. It's great dialogue. And I think it's great that you have actors that are doing such a good job, but when they have such great words to work from, I think it was great writing and great acting.
It's so believable, that we could see these guys as long time friends and just giving each other shit but caring about each other.
Yeah.
Again, that's the result of great acting and great dialogue. Like, you don't even think about it twice. It's just like, we don't get a lot of that in horror movies. Yeah. We just don't.
I believe these guys are friends. When they talk to each other, so I believe they are friends.
Yeah. And so then we get, and I don't know if this is what's next, but is it the death of Father Dyer? And this one is, I know Kinderman is at home and I think he's sleeping and he gets a telephone call. I don't know if it's in the morning. I don't recall. Either way, he gets a phone call. And he goes to the hospital, and in the room is
which I think what happens before that is an important thing to talk about.
Please, because I forget stuff. Bring it up. Tell me.
So he is at home and he's sleeping, and he's not sleeping very well, and he has the dream sequence.
Thank you. I forgot about the dream sequence.
And that's just distracting as all get out for the number of like cameos that
I didn't understand this. So explain this to me. And we could argue it's a dream, and you can do whatever in a dream, right? Okay. Yeah. And maybe that's what they're doing here, but I didn't understand Patrick. Look, I know Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, Patrick Ewing
played at Georgetown.
Yeah.
And of course the film takes place in Georgetown. I know.
I didn't make that connection. I was like, that's just Patrick Ewing.
Oh no, he played at Georgetown. And then earlier in the film you see John Thompson, I think that's his name, and he was the coach at Georgetown when I think when the film was made, and he coached Patrick Ewing. John Thompson was the coach, and he's in a scene earlier in the movie, and he's in the background. And then there was Fabio, which I didn't understand. Fabio,
another one from earlier when when Father Dyer and Kinderman are eating in the restaurant, is really split. A real quick one is Larry King. I saw Larry King in there for some reason.
Why is Larry? I'm going to assume Larry King is from Georgetown.
I don't know.
It would make sense.
I didn't put anything together when I saw these cameos. I didn't think that there was any connection to the area or anything.
Has to be,
these
right?
Are just people,
I mean, I would think with Patrick Ewing being from, playing at Georgetown, that was, so maybe Fabio, I don't know, man, maybe Fabio. To me, Fabio just seems so out of whack there. It just didn't make any sense to me. And I remember saying that when I watched the movie. I'm like, okay, I get the Patrick Ewing thing. I didn't catch Larry King, but in the credits I saw Larry King. And
there's one more. Do you know what there was one more. His voice was dubbed over, and I didn't catch this on my last viewing. I caught it on the viewing that I did last week. I'm like, was that? And then I looked it up, and it was, because his voice has been dubbed over, but Samuel L. Jackson is the blind guy listening to the radio. So the angels are sitting there trying to reach out to Earth, and no one's listening. And he says something about the living never listen or something like that. But that was Samuel L. Jackson.
That was him?
Yeah.
Why'd they dub over his voice?
No idea.
I mean, he has a great voice.
Probably because he said, these motherfuckers ain't listening. Something like that.
Yeah.
We can't use it. Give him a better line.
That's hilarious, man. Yeah, the dream was weird to me. But again, it's
And I think it's an important thing to go over, though, because
it is. I mean, and it's look, I mean, the dream itself bothers me, but in the scope of the movie, the dream makes sense, or the dream as a whole makes sense because it's a dream, man.
Yeah.
All kinds of shit happens. And there, you can't really control anything. And we see, and he comes as he's walking through it almost looked like an auditorium or something. Is that what this was?
I took it as like a Grand Central Station. Is that what this like was? A bus station or something like that.
And he sees the boy, we see the boy. And then we see all these other characters, and he comes across Father Dyer.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes across Father Dyer, and I thought was he playing chess or something? Or
I thought he was playing chess or checkers or something, but with Patrick Ewing, right?
Yeah.
Or was he just sitting there because Patrick Ewing is doing the tarot cards?
Oh, so is that what it was?
Maybe it was the angel of death, like playing the tarot cards. So maybe he's just getting a reading because we established that he's into like fashion and things like that. Maybe, I don't know. But funny. You notice that he's saying, "Hey, sometimes I wonder if we're both having the same dream." And he says, "No, I'm not dreaming." And you notice that he's got the scars around his neck that he's at that point had already been decapitated.
Yeah.
So
and then we get to again the scene where he gets called to the hospital. He goes into the hospital room, and there's a sheet over Father Dyer. What we have to the left of the bed are jars. They look like little plastic. Are they little plastic containers?
Jars or cups with lids?
I don't know. There's probably 20, 30 of these things, and they have a red liquid in them. Very clean.
I never put together that it was red when I was a kid. Just probably the VHS. I'm like, what?
Oh, probably, yeah.
What is the black liquid? Is it motor oil or something?
Oh, so it looked black.
Yeah, the first time I didn't know what it was, but it all looked it's very clean, very sterile. Like,
yes. Yeah. And we have something on the wall, but it's covered up in a sheet. And Father and actually Kinderman walks around, of course, does his thing. He's looking at I think he starts with the right, and I think he starts with the left hand, and then he moves to the right hand, and then he asks what these containers are. And well, that's Father Dyer's blood.
That is one of my favorite things about that movie is that just the scene is completely quiet. There isn't a big brooding score, a big foreboding anything. It's completely quiet. And he's like, what's that? Very almost casually.
Yeah.
And he's just his reaction when he says, what? Like, almost inaudible. Like,
yeah. It's George. And I'm going to keep reiterating this. Great actors don't have to say anything, and they convey so much. And in this movie, I mean, it's just everywhere. And The Changeling would be another one. I loved him in The Changeling, which we've done an episode about a long time ago. He's phenomenal in that. It's the same type of. He's just a great actor.
Yeah.
It's just an expression on his face. It could be just him pausing, or just it could be a hand gesture. It just conveys so much, man. And he does this throughout the movie, and it's so damn good, man. And he does this here, and then they explain that it's Father Dyer's blood. I don't remember the lead up to, hey, there's something on the wall, and of course he pulls the sheet off and it says It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, it was that this is his entire blood supply with the exception of the writing on the wall. And then he said, writing on the wall. And that's when he rips the plastic or whatever off the wall, and you see that he had written, It's a Wonderful Life.
And that comes into play because there's two L's at the end. And, what we find out is, so I guess I don't want to give it away right yet, right? He's devastated by this, as any of us would be, right?
Yes.
Not only he is seeing these terrible murders, and now there's 3 of them over the course of a few days. And
it was before or after this. I think it might have been before that they are doing the scene, because there was the scene where he was having the fingerprint analysis, the fingerprint engineer. I don't know what that guy's called.
Yeah.
He's telling him that he needs to pat or dust the inside of the confession booth for fingerprints.
That's
this is
true.
why, because you're just going to get the fingerprints of. So he puts together how the killer would have reached through and closed the door. And before then, they're getting the analysis back, and they realize that these 2 killings were done by the same person. So the fingerprints that they found on the inside of the confession booth is the same fingerprints that they found on the oars the boy was crucified on. And they said, no. And that's where he's freaking out. Two different people did this.
Yeah.
And then Father Dyer gets killed. And so this is the third killing. And he's like, okay, somebody got into this hospital.
Yeah.
So we need to lock this hospital down. And it could be anybody here.
Yeah.
And I think that plays into the next scene where the hospital administrator is arguing with them because he wants to take fingerprints from all the patients. He wants to take fingerprints from all the doctors.
Yeah. And he's not having that.
No.
And he's very pissed off and irate about this. And, you know, and this is where we get this scene with George C. Scott. It's this flip with him. It's like he's trying to explain and then he chokes up, man. It's like, look, this is emotional for me. My best friend just died, and he died in this horrific manner, first of all, on top of everything else that's been transpiring the last few days. And he explains to him as to the Gemini Killer, you know, when all these deaths were occurring with the Gemini Killer, he had a certain MO, right?
Yes.
He would do this and this and this. He'd do these things. And so everyone, you know, you get these wackos that come in and they turn themselves in, I'm the Gemini Killer. Okay, well then tell me, you know. And so what they did is they fed out misinformation.
Yeah.
So that way that we could weed out all the crazies, you know. So, you know, I don't recall what the specifics were. I think one was like, you know, one was that they cut off this finger, and then on the back he carved like the Gemini sign or something like that.
Yeah. And
that wasn't the case. The case was the actual killer would cut off, say, the index finger on this hand and would carve the symbol in the palm of the other hand. But see, no one knew that. Yeah. And he's explaining this to everybody. No one knew that other than the people who worked the case.
Yep. Richmond homicide.
Yeah.
Which is another plot hole we could talk about later. Okay, not a plot hole. It's not a plot hole. Yeah.
So, you know, so he's explaining this on this, and this is why we need to do this, because no one knew this. And now we have 3 murders that kind of follow the MO of the Gemini Killer.
Yes.
And so, but you know, from a standpoint of like a lieutenant, and you knew the guy was executed or died or whatever it was, whether he got shot by a ton of bullets or he was executed, he's dead. Yeah. What the hell's happening here?
Yeah. How is this killer have the correct MO of the original Gemini Killer? Yeah.
And so I think it's around the time I don't know if Dr. Temple has, I know there's a scene where he's walking around the hospital, and
that's a great scene.
Yeah. And so he walks around the hospital and he goes by one of the, is it a psychiatrical? What ward is that? I mean,
it's a hospital. So I think it's a standard hospital, but they also have a psychiatric wing. Yeah. And they have kind of a convalescent wing where there are Alzheimer's patients and autistic patients and things like that. And then there is the lockdown area for violent, troubled, violent people.
And I don't remember if we've already gotten where he's, talked to any of the elderly, women, because I know one of the fingerprints comes back and it's a match to her.
Yes.
I don't recall if we've done it. I think he has talked to her about that. Do you remember being in this room? Because one of the nurses say, hey, look, did you see anything weird? And she goes, I didn't see anything except for this. And she basically says, look, I found our patient passed out. I don't remember if she was nude or not. She might've been nude. I don't remember.
Maybe. Yeah.
And we found her out, not too far from, Father Dyer's room. Okay. Well, that's interesting enough. Let's question her. And, so they question her. And of course, she's got Alzheimer's, or I don't know what she has,
completely
but it's
not lucid, incoherent.
Like it's not like this particular woman or person could not have done what she did. It would have just taken too much.
They want to know if she saw what happened. Yeah. And the last thing they're considering is that she is the person who committed these murders. Yeah. And as the audience, we are as well.
Right. I mean, you look at her going, there's no way this fragile older woman could do something like this. Something,
And again, it's such a great performance. The old woman that I'm looking at it and I'm going, is this an old lady that really has Alzheimer's and she doesn't know that she's in a movie right now because her performance is amazing. She's perfect.
Really good, man. But at this point, Kinderman, doesn't he walks around a little bit and comes across the psychiatric ward where does he hear his name called, right? I think he hears the name Mike. And so he stops and he goes and he peeks into the room. And this is where we get the first glimpse of, this is the thing. We're going to call him Father Karras, but it's really the Gemini Killer.
And he hasn't looked at him yet. Dr. Temple, who's played by, is it Scott Wilson?
I forget.
Who was in The Walking Dead
was in
later.
The Walking Dead, yeah.
I think his name was Scott Wilson, but he's showing him around the wing and he's explaining the security. So if we have these violent people, they can't get out because the door has to be, combination lock. Long story short. So he looks in the window and he sees a patient sitting there in a straitjacket, doesn't have any idea who it is. You're just getting kind of a silhouette.
Yeah.
And that's as far as it goes in that particular scene.
Yes. And what point does he come back though it's because Dr. Temple calls for Kinderman, and it's funny.
And there's that great scene,
where he's rehearsing what he wants to, talk to him about, and
chain
stuff.
smoking, and just saying, that.
Did it bother you how he was holding his cigarette? I wanted, dude. Look, I've never smoked a cigarette, but I've seen people, and who holds a damn cigarette like that when they smoke? Do people do that?
No, I mean, I do remember it being weird. I just thought that man is dealing with a certain level of anxiety right now, and he's holding, his lines. He's holding. He'd written down what he wanted to say, and he was in his office rehearsing it.
Yeah.
So I didn't give too much. It didn't bother me too much. I just assumed that this is a man who's really, really awkward right now.
You think so? I could have been that. What it spanked to me was like, he's an actor that never smoked in his life, but his character was required to smoke, and he was holding it all funky.
Isn't it funny how in some movies you can tell when an actor doesn't really smoke and they're playing a character that smokes, which is happening, fewer and fewer times these days.
Yeah.
But you can tell that this person isn't holding it. I did smoke for a number of years.
Did you really?
Yeah. A good 10 years of my life. And
you did? I didn't know that.
It's just like any mannerisms or anything that somebody does when you do the thing, you know the natural way it's done. Or let's say same way that you're watching a baseball movie and you can tell that guy isn't a real baseball player.
True.
Because I can have seen baseball players play baseball and he's not doing it right.
Yeah. No, I agree. So he talks. So Dr. Temple talks with Kinderman, explains, hey, so then he goes into, this is where Kinderman goes into the room, and
he explains that 15 years ago, this guy came, the cops picked this guy up and they brought him in and he was completely out of it.
Catatonic.
Completely catatonic. In the book, they call him Mr. Sunshine because they explained that they would take him into the common room where everybody was, and he wouldn't talk to anybody. He wouldn't say anything. But as the sun would filter through into the room and land on something, he would get up and go sit in the sun. Oh. And as the day progressed and the sun was moving around, he would just get up and move to the sun in the room. So years go by, and obviously they say he recently came to, and go ahead and take it from there.
Well, I mean, so Kinderman, gets a look at this guy, and he goes, I think he comes out and he's kind of taken back, and he's like, look, I believe this to be, my friend, Father Karras.
And that's where the speech was. Yeah.
Yeah. But he died 15 years ago, but I believe this is him. And I don't, do they get in? Shortly after, does he go and talk with the Gemini Killer? Because there's a lot of those scenes. I just don't recall like in which sequence do they happen. They're all great. And this is where, we kind of get the first of Brad Dourif and him doing his, kind of showing off his acting chops because he's phenomenal. And
this is where the like powerhouse acting takes place and the exchanges between these two. I
don't recall, I don't recall all of the exchanges and everything that's said, but I mean, he's basically telling him what he's been doing. He's the Gemini killer. He's responsible for all these deaths.
Yeah, he doesn't get into how he's doing it.
No.
I think the first time, Kinderman goes in and he recognizes the patient as Damien Karras.
Yeah.
And which, side note on this, you realize that as soon as Father Dyer was murdered, you have to, like, the critic in me is going, he should really consider recusing himself from this investigation because his friend just got murdered and he's still heading up the investigation.
Right.
And none of the cops around him are even suggesting, hey, maybe you're a little too close to this one, Bill.
Yeah, right.
But so he recognizes Damien Karras, and he's friends with Damien Karras, despite what we had discussed earlier about their entire relationship taking place over the course of the last movie. But so now he's recognizing this person as a friend of his, and he needs to speak with this person. And again, like, I think you're a little too close to this one, Bill.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like, no. George C. Scott can handle it.
He can handle this, yeah.
So he goes in, and Jason Miller starts, which I think it's important to mention that there was a director's cut of this film that came out that omitted Jason Miller completely.
That's so interesting to me.
Yeah, and I actually think that the theatrical version for this reason works better. Yeah. I really do like Jason Miller's performance in this.
I do too. I've not seen the director's cut or the other version, so I can't speak to it, but I've seen this one several times. I like the idea that he is here. Yeah. I like this kind of change, right? It's, 1 second we see Father Karras, and then the next second we see the Gemini killer.
Yes.
But I don't think George C. Scott, he sees him, but he doesn't. It's like at times it's weird to me because it's almost like a switch, like, and maybe it's the belief. It's this, is he believing or is he not believing? Is it, because, the cynical side in George C. Scott, it's, do you think that at times he believes and sometimes he isn't believing? Or do you think he's seen what we're seeing at all times?
I think he's experienced, we're discovering this with him. And the reason why I think that the Jason Miller being in the movie is important is that we as the audience are discovering that Father Karras is still alive. And that's the important part of having him in that role.
Yeah.
I don't think that George C. Scott, I don't think that Kinderman believes this patient. It's beyond his realm of possibility. He's not on the level right now. He's like, I need to talk to this person to find out what's going on here.
Yeah.
Because this is a coincidence and we need to figure out what's happening. But I don't think he believes just yet.
Takes a little bit. Yeah.
And I think that just the dramatic reveal of Brad Dourif taking over when George C. Scott is telling him the Gemini killer is dead. And then that really visceral reaction from Brad Dourif saying, no, I am not. And then you suddenly see in Brad Dourif for the first time was heavy. It was awesome. I loved that sequence.
But then right afterwards, he like almost apologizes, right? Like I think he does. I think
he wants something from George C. Scott's character. What was he continually asking him? He's like, you need to make sure that the papers refer to these killings as the Gemini killings. So he can't be too demanding of him. Yeah. He has to pull it back and then start befriending this guy because he needs him to do something.
And I mean, do you think simply because, okay, so we know serial killers. I mean, look, I don't know any serial killers, but I'm just saying we from our experience, through movies and TV and television shows, whatever it is, books, things that we've seen online or read about. Serial killers are, they're sociopaths, right? They think a certain way,
Yep.
And so this would make sense that, look, I want to get credit for these things.
Yeah.
I want credit for this. I am the Gemini killer. You think he's dead. I am the Gemini killer. And I've done these murders and I want you to let everyone know.
Yeah. And it's important to that character because the motivation for the killings was to, and you find this out in the book, is that the whole reason the Gemini killer is going on was to shame his evangelist father, whose name was Carl with a K.
With a K, yeah.
And so he wants to continue. And in the book, Carl is actually still alive. So it's very important to the Gemini killer to know that he is still beyond the grave, shaming his father by continuing these killings. So
now, do you remember what was the significance of the 2 L's? Was it because of his father?
I just think it was in the letters that because
wrote,
it's obviously, spoiler alert, the Gemini Killer is actually based on the Zodiac Killer from, the San Francisco area, which is another, I'm going to have to go on this tangent.
Go ahead.
Because I'm thinking that in Jason Miller describes, that his first murder was I forget the gal's name, but he had picked her up near Candlestick Park.
I caught that.
It took place and he says before too, no one outside of Richmond homicide knew that. So Kinderman knew that. So it would be reasonable to believe that Kinderman was at one point or another, since he was on the Gemini case, a detective all the way on the other side of the country in the Bay Area. But 15 years prior, he was still in the Georgetown area, on the periph of the original exorcism. Am I overthinking that one?
No, I don't think so, because I caught the candles. I didn't know. I didn't get that part. Like I just assumed that Kinderman had always been in Georgetown, but did the Gemini Killer, did he move around? Because we know, usually serial killers will stay in an area, but he could have started in California and then he moved his way, back
well, maybe
east.
that was a way to honor, since they knew they were, they did it in Dirty Harry too. They ripped off the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a way to kind of pay homage to the victims that have never gotten justice for those killings. Is that we're not going to say the Gemini Killer took place in Georgetown.
Yeah.
We need to, honor the original victims in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
Did all the killings take place in the Bay Area for the Zodiac?
As far as I know, I haven't really dug into that one.
Yeah, I haven't. I've heard of the Zodiac, of course. It's a weird, and I'm sure other people have it. It's a weird fascination that you have with serial killers. It's not like we condone anything they do, but it's interesting. It's kind of like the mob, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I would never want to be, have anything, be involved with it or, any of that. But it's interesting. Like you sit down and watch Goodfellas or you watch whatever, The Godfather. It's interesting.
It's an extreme example of what a human being is capable of.
Yeah.
So, it's you don't want to use the word extraordinary because that's kind of, you hear that and you think, oh, that's a good thing. No, this is extraordinary in the most awful, worst possible way.
Exactly. But I've always been fascinated, man. I don't know about you, but I've always been fascinated with that. If a documentary comes out on, I think one came out on, God, I thought it was Ted Bundy, maybe last year or the year before. I sat down and I watched it on whatever it was, Netflix. It was interesting, man.
Fun fact, I understand that Exorcist III was Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite movie. I read something about this.
Shit.
I don't know if when they had gotten, when he had been arrested or something, but he had watched The Exorcist III with one of his victims.
Oh, Jesus. So, yeah. Well, that guy was a fucking weirdo, man.
Yeah. Yes.
But anyways, okay, so where are we? We have some awesome dialogue with Brad Dourif and George C. Scott.
And that's where a lot of the exposition comes in, where he starts to describe that perhaps his possession of Father Karras had been facilitated by Pazuzu as retribution for Father Karras, exorcising him from Reagan.
Because So Pazuzu essentially has said, look, you're eventually going to do some things for me. I'm going to put you into this body and down the road. And we know it took 15 years because there is some dialogue where, look, Father Karras's brain was mush, man.
Yes.
He was dead. He was dead.
Yes.
And so it took 15 years for the soul or the spirit or whatever you call it, the soul of the Gemini Killer to kind of bring back this, to
reconstitute the brain.
Yeah. And it took him this long to do. And so, and now he can, but this is the thing, man. We know, okay, so we'll say Pazuzu, the demon is basically controlling these I guess the elderly, these women, right? Because these killings are happening, someone's doing them, but it's no one seems to know anything. We get a fingerprint. It's this old woman. How is this happening? Like,
Yes.
what is going on here? And so Pazuzu essentially is taking over the minds, or really the mind and the body of these women, because they're catatonic or Alzheimer's, so their brain's just not, it just doesn't function like ours do, and so they're easily taken over.
Yeah,
and that's what's happening. Yeah, and that's what's, and if you think about it, how often, I guess if there was a murderer, would you suspect a 70, 60, 70-year-old woman? That's
no, of course not.
You're not. And and I don't know if there was a line. I thought he said, I don't remember what Brad Dourif said, but I thought there was a line that he said something about friends, or
yes,
I have.
He said, "How do you get out?
Yeah,
how do you get out?
How
the doctor's letting you out." I think he said at one point, and he just said, "Friends,
like
very
close.
Casually, very knowingly, like I'm not giving you all the information."
Yeah. And so, but he's. I don't remember. Again, man, it's hard to jump from scene to scene and remember every single thing, but I know Kinderman goes to talk with, I think that older lady, I don't remember her name. And is this the scene where she's crawling on the ceiling? Because we know that, I just don't remember. I'm trying to remember the sequence in dialogue, and I think might be after, because there's another banter back and forth where he explains, I used Dr. Temple, to get you here, so that I could have you do all of these things, and then I think Dr. Temple, I don't know if we see him dead, but I assume he killed himself. He committed suicide because there was a needle, or was that simply the demon taking him over? I don't know.
I never really got that. I have assumed the entire time that it was suicide.
See, that's what I thought too.
But now that you mention it, maybe not. Then in the book, there it's a little different in the book. I think the Dr. Temple character in the book of Legion is kind of played by, it's two different characters.
Oh, okay.
So there's a Dr. M. Fortis, and he is on his way out. So he's leaving because he has been doing this research. His wife had died tragically, and he's been doing this research where he's, recording the air, and he's trying to record in his house, and he's recording voices. And he's going as far, and long story short, I don't want to get into, because it's got nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah.
Temple is like the other doctor, who's kind of like the braggart, the less scrupulous doctor.
Okay.
So he doesn't, I don't think he dies in the book. I don't think he even dies in the book, but M. Fortis, turns out he's got a tumor in his head, and he's on his way out. Okay. Where that matters into this, I'm not sure, but I don't think Temple had anything to do with that I just think Temple was on his way out in the movie.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because you could take it both ways. Yeah, he felt terrible about all these things. He basically, the Gemini Killer, or Pazuzu, basically forced him to kind of come in contact with Kinderman. Maybe the guilt, or Pazuzu. Man, Pazuzu. It seems like Pazuzu can do just about anything.
Honestly, it could have been like the Gemini Killer possessed one of the patients and murdered Dr. Temple.
Maybe. Oh yeah, that's true too. But see, okay, the Gemini, the Gemini himself, Father Karras / the Gemini Killer, I don't think he can possess them. I think this is Pazuzu who's possessing him. He is just he's kind of like I hate to say this, like Pazuzu's bitch, right? That's what I think is happening.
Because he makes the comment, you need friends, and in the place that I'm at, you need friends, and I have a friend.
Yes.
But I don't feel like there's a thing that makes sense later when you have the exorcism with Father Morning. But I have always assumed that it was that Pazuzu kind of facilitated the possession of Father Karras.
Okay.
And
yep, that makes sense.
That's where the Gemini Killer learned how to do it. And then he is also the one that he's getting directed because there are people like it's very purposeful. Like it's revenge. The Pazuzu wants revenge. That's why the boy, Thomas Kintry, that's murdered at the beginning. There's a whole, they reveal later that it was his mother was the expert that worked with Father Karras to decipher the language that Reagan was speaking.
Because all the killings, they all mean something. They all have some sort of
And I think Father Canavan was the one I want to say that had approved the original, that had reviewed and approved the original exorcism.
And then of course we know Father Dyer. We know the relevance there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe now that you're saying it, it makes sense, right? It's like it took the 15 years to get to this point, and if say the Gemini Killer was taught or given these, I don't know, I hate to say powers, but then okay, and as a kind of as a I don't know if it's a. It's like, look, I'm going to do this for you, but in return, you're going to do these things for me. Yes. But it took the 15 years to get to that point.
Yeah, and at the end, though, too, was Father Mourning there to exorcise the Gemini Killer from Father Karras, or was Father Mourning there to exorcise Pazuzu? Because I had always taken it that it was Pazuzu stepping in at the end there, and that's why Father Karras's eyes were there's the close up of Father Karras's eyes, that I always took it as like that was the demon. That, I mean, it was there, and that's why he was able to create the illusion in the room and all the hallucinations and things like that. That it was Pazuzu. But I think we both know now that the exorcism doesn't exist in the book. William Peter Blatty did not want it in the movie.
Yeah.
They just insisted on that sequence being inserted at the end because they were making a movie called fucking Exorcist III.
Exorcist, we got to have an exorcism in it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, there you go. I mean, there you go. I mean, if it wasn't in the book.
Yeah, make a comment when you listen to this and tell us what you think.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because I have not read the book, and in the director's cut, he didn't have that ending anyways. To me, and as I was telling you earlier, Donovan we were talking about it yesterday, and he was like, yeah, the exorcism as a whole, it's not necessary. Like, I feel any scenes with Father Mourning, like if you go back through and watch the movie, there's like one scene where he's in his bedroom and I think this bird dies and the cross falls off. And then I don't know if there was another scene with him, but it's like, well, none of this is really relevant.
I know, but at the same time, I actually feel like that particular character echoed Father Merrin in the first movie. Like you have this entire sequence of Father Merrin in the original Exorcist, where he's in Iraq, he's an archaeologist, but suddenly at the end of the movie, he's the one that shows up. The actual protagonist of the exorcism is Damien Karras, but he's just the guy assisting the exorcism.
Yeah.
And so in the same way, you have because Father Merrin is not connected to the plot of The Exorcist until he arrives to perform the exorcism.
Yeah.
Father Karras is. Father, George C. Scott is the protagonist of this situation right now, and Father Mourning is on the outskirts of it, and he's the one that shows up at the end. So you're echoing the first exorcism in that, for me anyway.
Yeah, you think? I mean, to me, in the first one, it made sense. I never questioned it. Like, okay, that makes sense. Like in this one, it felt, I don't know, man, pushed on me or something. Like it didn't belong. And now knowing that scene wasn't even supposed to exist makes more sense to me. Like, and I always felt that way. Like I didn't get a lot of this Father Mourning. Like we got a lot at the beginning of The Exorcist with Father Merrin, Max von Sydow, rest in peace. We got a lot of that at the beginning, in fact, this, the scene where, he's in Iraq and he goes up to the the ruins,
Yeah.
and he stands. It's like, and he sees Pazuzu. It's like, it's almost like this foreshadowing. You and I are going to
that
meet.
great shot of them, like just like two fighters on a title card of a fight. You know, these guys are going to do battle later.
But
great
shot. Yes, but I don't get that with this. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't take it as. I just took it as an echo of that. You know, something kind of just a whisper of that. And honestly, I'm probably creating something where it wasn't supposed to be, because we all know it wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it worked for me. The other thing about the exorcism at the end that did work for me is that the entire plot of the movie, you have George C. Scott, who is this character who is in a crisis of faith, in the same way that Damien Karras was in a crisis of faith during the exorcism.
Yeah.
The Exorcist, the first.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, when, spoiler alert, Father Morning is defeated, which I always thought he died too. A rewatch, I realized he wasn't dead, because he was the one that picked up the cross at the very end.
Yeah.
Was that through all of this discussing, he's a cop, he's a grizzled cop that has seen all of these terrible things. And he has that great line where he says, and your God is just casually dancing around the universe like some kind of cosmic Billy Burke. That he has this great speech at the end where he says, I believe, I believe in sickness and all of these things. And you realize that he, in a way, is rediscovering his faith while he's being pinned to the wall by a demon.
Yeah.
And just, most people come to faith by praying and finding Jesus. He's coming to his faith and finding God by doing battle with a demon.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was I had never seen that element put into a story that involves, heavens and gods and devils and regular men and grizzled, police lieutenants.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think, and really it's that kind of change in his mindset that now that belief, that kind of how it tripped and changed really is what kind of saved him.
I think that's what his spiritual arc in the film, if he has one, was that he's questioning all of this. He's questioning, whatever faith he may or may not have had in his life.
Yeah.
In the end, in that room, going face to face with the Pazuzu or the Gemini Killer or whoever else, he discovers that he does believe that God is there.
Well, if he believes in this demon and he believes in all these other things, then God believe in this. I mean, right? I guess it's that kind of balance, the good and evil,
If you're gonna have a character arc, it's as good as any, really.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, we know that he does this spiel, the Father Morning, after skin's been ripped off. That was gnarly.
He was flayed, man.
Dude, that was gnarly. I'll tell you, that was one of the scenes I never liked. Look, it looked great, and it's nasty though. I never liked skin being ripped off, man.
No, I don't think we're supposed to.
It's funny, man. It's like, and I think I mentioned this in the podcast. When I was younger, I could tolerate that stuff more. Now I am not tolerant of it. Like I would prefer not to watch movies where skin or stuff is being ripped off and people, cutting them. I'm just not into it.
Another great thing about this movie is that all of the terrible, gruesome things, they're just described. They're not going to show you, you're not watching, to go back to Hellraiser, you're not watching Pinhead and the gang rip someone's flesh from their bones. Like, these things happen in this film, and these horrible things happen in this film, but they don't need to show it to you. They let your imagination run wild with it. And it's so much more effective than if you were to just put it in everyone's face.
Yep, I agree, man. I totally agree. What part we forgot about? And again, we jump around, is that jump scare.
That jump scare.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I don't even know what tool that is, but it's a tool they use, I'm sure, in some surgery or something.
Amputation. I've never heard of that. I'm pretty sure this device exists only in this movie. If any of you guys know and you've seen one, I'd be interested to know, but it's a terrifying piece of equipment.
Oh my God.
So my son is 7 years old, and Andrew, what's up, man? I'm going to let you listen to this. I love you. Johnny, you too. I love you too, buddy. So I got a 7-year-old that's obsessed with horror films, and
Oh my God, that's awesome. Though.
I'm against my better judgment. I've let him watch a couple of things, and I figure, okay, I'm going to let him watch, this movie, and I'm going to explain to him. Some people think it's fun to be scared for monsters to do these things, and it's already having bad results. This is a horrible mistake that nobody should do. But he was talking about jump scares earlier this week, and I said, kid, I'm going to show you the original jump scare. I'm going to show you the best jump scare of all time. So I played the sequence for him. He was not impressed. He's like, my 7-year-old says that was not a very good jump scare at all. I'm like, you're out of your mind, kid. And I realize I'm having a horror movie argument with a 7-year-old.
Dude, I've had discussions with. I had mentioned my goddaughter Shaylee. Even I don't know if Andrea, my daughter, has watched Exorcist. But Shaylee, for instance, she doesn't find The Exorcist scary, and I've had arguments with her. But I realize I can't argue with a teenager. It's because of, and I argue it's because of the everyone's desensitized. These kids, you can hop on a phone and find just about any crazy thing you want, or hop on your TV or whatever. And I think that's what's happened. And I don't know if that's the case with your son, but that jumps. I've seen this movie many times. I worked at the theater, as I told you. I used to go in there and I used to try to plan it out so I could see that jump scare, because it was one of my favorite parts and it still gets me. I know it's coming. It's so damn scary, man.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with the camera work of the filming. There's a lot of still shots. There's not, these days, I feel like everything these days that comes out is filmed with handheld cameras. Yeah. So you're seeing like the shaky camera work. The cameras don't move. They're still shots, and they stay in the same spot from the same perspective in the room. And all of these things can be happening, around the scene. And then suddenly it's a very fast zoom right in. And so it's not a jump scare in the sense that the decibel level goes from 0 to 120 and literally scare you out of your seat to kick you out of your seat with sound. It's subtle, it's movement, it's not loud, and it's such a great scare.
What I like about this scene as well is you got this nurse, I think this is Nurse Keating. And we have we know that the hospital's been locked down, and we have cops in all these different areas, and there's a cop there, and it's that with everything that's going on, it's that idea of this security, right?
Yes.
And I'm watching this going, I understand her thought process, but before I go and investigate this room where I'm hearing noises.
Yeah.
This is where Father Dyer died, and the room is locked up. I'm hearing this noise, but I'm making sure that this police officer or security or whatever he is there.
They're literally police officers guarding the hospital because there may or may not be a serial killer moving freely around the grounds.
Yes.
So I will admit, the last time I watched this, I was like, they should have put some kind of a change of guard in there. That somebody's heading off to the restroom or something like that. I feel like
just
the last cop leaving the frame happened just a little too soon before.
Really convenient
because that was a pretty gruesome way to go. Like, you're going to spill some blood. Like, any cop that comes back around within the next 2 minutes is going to see a mess on the floor.
Yes, that is true. But I just love the scene because I try to put myself into say the movie or that scene, and how I would feel if I'm, say, Nurse Keating. I'm this nurse, whatever I am, at this hospital, and all this stuff has happened. But again, it's that security. It's like, okay, well, you're here. Okay, I'm going to go and get the keys, and I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to see what's going on, man. Because that other person is here.
Yeah.
And then that thing is just stripped away, and it's just that, and you feel that, man. I mean, you feel it, man. And that's what I love. And
it's such a great scare.
It's a great scare. And the movie is just so darn good and effective, man. I don't know, man. I don't know if
it's a great film. It's a great film.
It really is. It holds up, man. It holds up, because this is 1990, and I'll go back and I'll watch movies, like, hell, you and I chatted about Hellraiser. It just didn't hold up for me. It was cool in 87. hell, it was probably cool in 1990, and then when I rewatched it several other times, it just didn't hold up for me. This is the same. I feel this is the same movie I watched in 1990 to
This
now.
movie is just as effective now as it would have been. It ages well.
It is. But anything, dude? Did we gloss over anything? Did we leave anything out? I know at the very end, and I brought this up earlier in the episode. And again, I do this sometimes, and I get so pissed off at myself. I focus on small things, and maybe they mean nothing, but I know Exorcist came out in 73. So I would, unless, and I don't recall, I'd have to rewatch The Exorcist. Does it say anywhere, a date or a time? I mean, I guess we could just.
I can't remember ever seeing any kind of a date stamp somewhere in the film.
Okay, so it's possible. So at the very end, when they show, Father Karras's tombstone, it says 75, and I guess that's possible.
And I tend to knock it. Yeah, that's
I get roped up in little stupid
the dates
things like
and
that.
Things like that, because sometimes there are movies where it's I can imagine everything happening right now. It's just 75. Oh, that was this and that, and I make the connections. I don't remember there being any kind of a date stamp. Or you try to say like, okay, what baseball game was on television at the time? Who was that?
I mean, just because
there's
came
clues,
out,
but it really could be taking place whenever.
It could be. Yeah, that's true. I do that all the time. I don't know. Sometimes I focus on stupid little things, but
now they have entire people whose job it is to make sure the continuity of the film is right, and they still screw up from time to time.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. Anything else? No, I can't think of anything else that we, I think we hit on just about everything. It's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, you need to go and, I don't know, these days, I guess, stream it. I don't know.
Yes.
I guess.
If you haven't seen The Exorcist III, I would assume that you haven't seen The Exorcist III because you didn't like Exorcist I, or because you didn't like Exorcist II. But if you haven't seen Exorcist III, go see the film. It's a great movie.
Completely forget about part 2. Just don't even put it in the equation. Go and check it out because you're going to enjoy it.
It'd be good to know that William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin had nothing to do with The Exorcist II, The Heretic.
Yeah.
William Peter Blatty wrote the original Exorcist, and this is based on his, this is the true sequel to The Exorcist.
Yes. So check it out. I guess that's it, man. Hey, thanks again for coming out.
Well, I appreciate you having me out again.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I was saying earlier, hey, go check out, hop on Instagram and go follow Lesser Sons Band. Facebook is Lesser Sons, and, check out their music on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, man. It was a pleasure having you out.
Thank you.
Like I said in the previous Hellraiser episode, man, I wanted you out for the longest time, but with the pandemic, it just didn't happen.
Yeah. I'm glad we've been able to do this. I've been listening to the show for a long time, and there's a lot of really good work here. You guys are doing great stuff.
Yeah,
so
man.
I'm glad you had me out to
I appreciate
let me be a part of it.
And if you're willing, we'll have you out again. And
wonderful.
It'd be awesome. Cool, man. Well, hey, everyone, take care, and thanks again for listening. You listened all the way to the end. We appreciate that. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Ear for Fear Podcast, Twitter at Ear for Fear, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Ear for Fear Podcast. You can also check out our website, earforfear.com. There we list news and events. We're available on all the main platforms, so make sure you tell a friend. We hope you come back and get an earful.